Chapter 1. Brittany flexed her fingers, feeling like she'd signed her name at least 30 million times in the past hour. Of course, she knew she and her sisters hadn't purchased that many of their CDs to autograph and sell, but it felt like it. She and her sisters were identical triplets, and worse than that, they lived together and had a musical group together. It was like they were going to be known as the identical triplets forever. It made her crazy. She pushed her glasses, that she didn't need but set her apart, up farther on her nose, and sighed. "I'm hungry." Stephanie, the youngest and the shyest, said, "I have a huge stack waiting for you too. I'll run and get food while you two keep signing." Brittany groaned as she reached for another CD and scrawled her name on it. Emily, the middle sister of triplets had a middle sister, leaned over as soon as Stephanie was gone. They finally had a lull in the crowd trying to buy their CDs. "I have a secret that I just have to share with you." Emily had spent a lot of time for the past couple of days hanging out with some guy, and Brittany was immediately nervous that her sister was going to run off and marry him, leaving her and Stephanie high and dry. Emily was the lead singer of their musical group, and they simply couldn't do it without her. Brittany immediately voiced her concerns, but Emily just shook her head. Emily said something about the guy that Brittany completely blocked out, and then she heard, "The guy who runs Rebel's Saloon came and talked to me. They need an act for a week from Saturday, and we're booked." Brittany felt for a moment as if the world was closing in on her. Rebel's Saloon was one of the hottest venues for country music in all of Houston. In all of Texas. She wanted to get up and dance with excitement. "Rebel's Saloon? Are you kidding me?" Emily gave her a few more details, and Brittany just sat there in shock for a moment. "I never dreamed." "Rebel's Saloon?" She screamed for a second. She had needed to get that out of her system. Stephanie was back a few seconds later. "I want to tell her." "Then tell her." Emily had a ridiculous grin on her face, and Brittany frowned, knowing that she was probably wearing the same grin. She loved her sisters, but she hated sharing the same face. "Guess what we're doing a week from Saturday?" Brittany said, concentrating on Stephanie's face. She was so excited to let her sister know what they were doing. Their career was being made both by this rodeo and Rebel's Saloon. This rodeo had been amazing for them so far. Of course, as the opening act, it should have been. By the look on your faces, I'd say the Grand Ole Opry. "Tell me." Stephanie stood holding their food, fair food, which wasn't a favorite for Brittany or Stephanie, but Emily would gobble it up like there was no tomorrow. "Rebel's Saloon." Stephanie's jaw dropped, and she looked like she was torn between wanting to vomit and wanting to do a celebratory dance. "Are you kidding me?" Emily laughed and responded to her. "Do you mean to tell me that Lipstick on My Jeans is going to be played at Rebel's Saloon? My song?" Stephanie was still looking shocked. "Our song." Brittany refused to give her all of the credit. Stephanie wrote the lyrics, but they weren't really songs until Brittany added the music to them. Strangely enough, Brittany wasn't the lead singer, but she was still the most musical of the three. She could pick up any instrument and play it by ear. She stood and hugged her sisters close. This was their dream, and it was finally coming true for them. And then Emily's man, Chris, was there, trying to introduce them to his friend, Matt. Brittany looked at the man and felt as if her heart was beating 1,000,000 times per minute. Her legs felt a little weak, and she was sure she let out a gasp, but that would have been silly, but she was sure she did anyway. Matt looked confused as he looked at the three of them. "Why didn't you tell me they were identical triplets?" Brittany stepped closer to him. "Would it be strange if I touched him?" "I'm glad he didn't. It's fun surprising people." But she was glad her glasses were firmly in place. He'd never have trouble telling her from her sisters. His eyes met hers, and she felt it all the way down to her toes. What kind of magic did this man practice to have such power over her? I guess it would be sometimes. Chris gave me one of your CDs. I really love your music. Brittany couldn't have been happier at that moment. My sister Stephanie and I wrote all the songs. I'm very impressed, and you won't hear me say that often. Matt was only looking at her, and she appreciated that. Brittany could hear her sisters whispering behind her, but she didn't care. The only person she had eyes, or ears, for was Matt. Tell me about yourself. Matt grinned. Well, I'm a former bull rider, but now I'm ranching. I know Chris from the rodeo circuit. I guess we run competing ranches now, but we both felt a lot more competitive when we were bull riding against each other. Do you like ranching? Matt shrugged. I always thought my brother would run the ranch, but he and his wife were killed in a car wreck a few months back. I'm raising his daughter now. It's not what I expected from life. I'm so sorry for your loss. How old is your niece? Her heart went out to him, raising a child and living a life he'd never wanted. She's 5. She's a sweetheart, but I have no idea what to do with a 5-year-old girl. Maybe I could help you. I used to be a 5-year-old girl, and so did both of my sisters. Probably at the same time even. Definitely. Brittany smiled. You just let me know when and where you need me, and I'll do what I can to help. Wednesdays are the only days I'm booked during the summer. And she hoped she wouldn't be doing any of the music lessons she taught once school started up. Hopefully by then their careers would be launched. She vaguely heard someone suggest they all go out after the vendor fair, which was connected to the Bear Creek Rodeo, closed, and her heart jumped. She wanted to spend more time with Matt. She wasn't sure what it was that was so terribly special about him, but she wanted to find out. She didn't pay attention to much, but when the guys started carrying some of the boxes of CDs to the car, she grabbed one, too. Looking at Emily, she said, "We need to keep them around." Once the CDs were stowed in the car she shared with her sisters, they all piled into Chris's truck, Emily in the front seat with Chris, and Brittany sat in the back with Matt. Brittany turned to Matt as soon as she was buckled, glad that she was able to sit beside him. Emily and Chris were talking in low tones in the front. "Tell me what a normal day is in your life," Brittany said. She needed to know everything about him immediately. Never had she been so drawn to a man as she was to Matt. "Well, I get up at 5 and have breakfast with Olivia. My housekeeper keeps an eye on her during the day, but I really wish there was someone a little closer to her around to help out. She needs a mother, or an aunt, as the case may be. I feel so bad for her. Poor thing. Do you like kids?" Yes, and no. I mean, I like the idea of kids, but I hate teaching music lessons. They never practice, and they complain about how hard it is. Mostly, I want to scream when they're like that. But a kid away from music lessons is just fine. He grinned. I can understand that. Music lessons don't sound pleasant. He would never forget his days of practicing piano. He had hated every minute of it, and his mother had finally let him stop. He'd always preferred being on a horse to practicing music. I teach piano and guitar, and let me tell you, if one more kid tells me they forgot to practice, I may scream. He laughed. Well, screaming can be fun when it's necessary. Tell me about your niece. What's she like? He shrugged. She's a pretty little girl. She likes girl things. She has a million Barbies and spends all her time playing with them. Brittany tilted her head to one side, trying to picture the man beside her sitting on the floor, playing Barbies, and the idea tickled her. Do you play Barbies with her? He frowned. I've been known to have Ken ride a horse on occasion, but she doesn't seem to want me around. That's sad. Do you look like your brother? We weren't identical twins or anything, but yeah, we looked quite a bit alike. Maybe she has a hard time with you because you remind her of her father. Brittany shrugged, reaching over and covering his hand with hers. It must be hard to lose your brother and inherit a child all at once. It is. If I'd been married, then my wife could have helped, but we lost our parents a while back, and it's just me for her. Matt looked at her. Want to get married and help me raise my niece? She blinked a couple of times. I think I probably will need to sleep on that one. For some reason, her sister Stephanie had been telling her for years that the man she was going to marry was going to propose within hours of meeting her. But Stephanie was into romance like no one else in her world. He laughed. I'll give you a week or two to get to know me before I expect a real answer. I really appreciate that. It's hard to answer when I've only known you for an hour. Matt twined his fingers through hers. Well, good. Now you know what I'm after, and I'll just have to mind my PS and QS, but I won't have to propose again, right? She frowned at him. I've always dreamed of a man proposing to me at sunset, on one knee, declaring his undying love for me. After a couple of weeks, make that happen, and we'll talk. He sighed. You're going to make me work for it, aren't you? Well, yeah. Do you think I'm just a Barbie doll you can buy from a shelf? No, of course not. He shook his head. If there was a way to find someone who would love her like I do, I'd be all over it. You could hire a nanny, couldn't you? Of course, she wasn't sure she wanted him to. It was too soon to make a decision, but she was definitely interested in the idea of it. I guess I could, but how would I know if the nanny wanted just the money, or if she was really interested in my niece? I'm not sure you would know. Nanny cams? He shook his head. No, I want to be sure that I find someone who genuinely cares for her. I'm going to be taking her to the rodeo with me tomorrow. I'd love it if you'd spend some time with us and get to know her better. He hoped she and Olivia would get along, and she'd tell him she'd marry him immediately, and all his troubles would be over. I'd like that a lot. I do have to spend every third hour at the table in the vendor area, selling CDs and signing autographs. My sisters and I are taking turns. I wish I hadn't missed the concert last night. Chris told me it was absolutely amazing. Brittany smiled. Well, thank you. I thought we sang well, and my playing was the best I've done. What instruments do you play? He asked. I'm one of those people who can pick up an instrument and just play it. I am trained in guitar, piano, banjo, and saxophone, but I play so many more than that. I played banjo and harmonica for the concert last night. I really cannot wait to see you perform. I'm going to the show at Rebel's Saloon. I have to. He was sorry that he'd missed the performance the night before, but since he hadn't heard of the group, he hadn't felt the need to go. He was regretting that decision now. I think you do, she said with a grin. Where are we going tonight, anyway? They pulled up beside a building, but she couldn't see a sign. Just some bar that Chris says has amazing food and lots of country music. We'll dance and eat. Works for me. She pushed her glasses up, thankful all three of them weren't there. As much as she loved her sisters, she didn't want to be an oddity on a date. People would still see that she and Emily were identical, but the glasses would make it take longer. They went inside, and the four of them sat together at a table. They ordered food, and Brittany was as usual surprised at just how much her sister could eat without gaining an ounce. She knew it would come back to haunt her someday, but for now, she was good as gold. After they'd eaten, Emily and Chris stole away from the table, leaving Brittany alone with Matt, which was just what she'd wanted. You don't want to dance? She asked. Matt shrugged. Maybe later. I just want to get to know you for now. I know you're in a country music band, and you teach music. What else do you do? Well, our sister Stephanie, who went home alone today, writes the lyrics for all of our original songs. I write the music. Emily just sort of reads through the songs at the end and makes them better. Sometimes it absolutely disgusts me, because we will slave for 2 weeks on a song and think it's perfect. She listens once and she changes 2 notes and 3 words, and then it really is perfect. Sounds like she has a good ear. We all do. I swear we were born dancing and singing. I love that I get to spend time every day with my 2 best friends, who are also my identical sisters, but it's frustrating sometimes, too. Is that why you wear glasses? He asked. She nodded. They're just clear lenses, but it feels good to usually look different. I don't wear them on stage, because we want to play the triplet angle there, but the rest of the time I do. Your sisters don't mind? You know, we've never really talked about it. The 2 of them embrace their sameness, but I don't know why it's always bothered me. After 13 years of school with everyone stopping you saying, "Oh, you're Emily's sister." Or worse, thinking I was Emily. I guess I just got fed up with it all. I prefer to be my own person, not just a third of a set. Makes perfect sense. I think I'd get really tired of that in no time. The other 2 came back to the table after a dance. We'll be right back, Emily said. After they had left the building, Matt took Brittany's hand in his. I thought they'd never leave. Brittany laughed. I thought you and Chris were friends. We are, it's just a little weird to have someone else with your face around. You're going to have to get used to it. My sisters and I are a matched set. We live together, play together, and work together. You're not going to find 3 sisters who spend more time together than we do. Think I could talk one of them into wearing a bright red clown nose and the other into rabbit ears? I would be less confused. She grinned at him, shaking her head. My glasses will set us apart enough. I promise. Chapter 2. When they got home, Matt and Brittany hurried up the stairs to the sisters' second-story apartment. Brittany had wondered all night if he would kiss her goodnight, and finally she had her answer. I guess they're saying goodnight in the truck, Matt said softly. Brittany nodded. I think they are. The other couple hadn't known one another much longer than she and Matt had, but a couple of days could be everything at the beginning of a relationship. Do you mind if I kiss you goodnight? In his memory, he could not recall ever asking permission to kiss a girl, but Brittany was special. He wasn't sure what it was about her that attracted him so much, but he was sure he could tell the sisters apart, simply because he was so much more attracted to Brittany. She nodded, tilting her head up for his kiss. His lips came down onto hers, sweetly toying with hers and not pressing for more. She wrapped her arms around his neck and sighed, contentedly, moving closer to him. After a moment, he lifted his head, looking down into her eyes. You pack a wallop, Brittany. I was just about to say the same about you. She pulled his head down again, and he kissed her more deeply this time, his tongue tracing her lips. Just as it felt like she was about to be lit on fire, she heard a voice from far away. Excuse me. It sounded like her voice, so she knew immediately that it was one of her sisters. Brittany jumped back from Matt, embarrassed to be caught kissing when they'd known each other such a short time. Of course, he had asked her to marry him. Good night, she said as Emily took her arm and pulled her into the apartment. She leaned against the door as the other 2 talked for a moment about their performance the night before, and she moved over to watch as Emily pulled up a video on YouTube that someone had posted the night before. After Emily headed off to bed, Brittany sat down beside Stephanie. She felt she had a special relationship with her youngest sister because they wrote songs together. How was your evening alone? Stephanie grinned. I really did write a new rodeo song. I think it's going to be a huge hit. She handed the lyrics to Brittany and waited as she read through them. Oh wow. I can already hear the beat in my head. I'll take my guitar for my table time tomorrow and work on it some while you guys are off. Brittany looked at her sister. Matt is going to bring his niece, who he's raising tomorrow, so I can meet her. She's going to spend the whole day at the rodeo. I can't wait to meet her. Has he asked you to marry him yet? Brittany laughed. You're still determined that I'm going to meet a man and marry him fast. Well, the truth is, he did ask me to marry him and be a mother to his niece Olivia. I said I had to sleep on it. I wasn't going to answer that so quickly. Stephanie started laughing and couldn't seem to stop. He actually asked you to marry him the day you met. I always knew that would happen to you. But you thought I'd say yes, and I didn't. That's true. Stephanie shook her head. I still think it's fun that happened. Are you looking forward to meeting his niece? Yeah, I am. He said she's a little shy, and she really wanted to spend the whole week with him at the rodeo, but he told her no. You always complain about the kids you teach music lessons to. Stephanie eyed her skeptically. What makes you think this one will be different? Honestly, I don't know. And it's not like I hate kids. I just have a hard time when they don't do what they're supposed to do and practice. Brittany shrugged. I feel like she's going to be different. Well, we'll see, won't we? You are going to take your turn selling CDs tomorrow, right? Yes, I'll be there. I wouldn't let the two of you down. Good. I feel like Emily is trying to go off with Chris all the time, and now you'll be going off with Matt. What about me? Brittany understood what her sister was saying, and she covered Stephanie's hand with hers. I know. You've always been the romantic, but somehow Emily and I are the ones finding love. I'd say it's not fair, but what would be the point? I'll just write another song about waiting for love to show up, and we'll make lots of money off of it. Brittany rested her head on Stephanie's shoulder for a moment. That sounds like how our lives go, doesn't it? It does. Oh well. Song fodder is nothing to sneeze at. Stephanie smiled, but it was a sad smile. You're going to find someone amazing. I know you will. Stephanie shrugged. Maybe I'll be a cat lady. Can't you just see me with 100 or so cats living with me? I'd feed them all, and they would worship me as much as any cat ever worships anyone. You've been allergic to cats since you were a little girl. How about being a crazy dog lady? Or a crazy bunny lady? I heard there's this crazy bunny lady who lives in Idaho and talks to fairies. Very strange if you ask me. I think I like the idea of bunnies, but maybe I should get tested to see if I'm allergic first. Stephanie wrapped her arm around Brittany. Thanks for checking on me, but I really am fine. Have fun tomorrow. I will. I hope you do, too. Maybe we could have the guys bring you a friend. Stephanie wrinkled her nose. I'll think about it. Good night. Brittany got up and wandered toward her room. They may be triplets in their 20s still living together, but at least she had her own room. She fell asleep, still feeling Matt's lips on hers. He was something pretty special, all right. Asterisk. The three sisters were unpacking their boxes of CDs at their table the next morning when Matt walked toward them, holding the hand of a little girl who was looking around her as if she was seeing something magic. He led her straight to their table, his focus on Brittany. This is my niece, Olivia. Olivia, this is Miss Brittany. She's my friend. Are you her Ken? Olivia asked. I don't even know what that means, Matt said, confused. Brittany grinned, understanding perfectly. I think he might be my Ken someday, but he's not yet. She leaned across the table and smiled at the little girl. It's very nice to meet you. These are my sisters. How come you all look the same? Olivia asked, her eyes dashing back and forth between the three sisters. You know what twins are, right? Brittany asked. Olivia nodded. Sure. Well, we're triplets, meaning we were 3 babies born at the same time instead of 2. Oh. Olivia's attention turned to something else. Is that you singing? One of the voices is mine. The other two are my sisters. We're a singing group. My favorite song is Puff the Magic Dragon. My mom sang it to me at night before bed every night. Brittany tilted her head to one side. Would you like us to sing it for you? She and her sisters had loved the song as children, and her guitar was behind them. She'd hoped for a little time to write music for the lyrics Stephanie had written the night before. Olivia nodded emphatically, her dark hair flopping in the wind. Yes, please. Brittany looked at her sisters. Emily was smiling as she shut off the CD playing, and Stephanie handed her the guitar. Brittany sat down and put the guitar on her knee, playing the opening notes, and then Emily took the lead. By the time they had finished the song, there was a crowd around them, and Olivia was standing in front of them. Thank you. Brittany smiled, nodding to the applause and knowing her sisters were doing the same behind her. We weren't planning to do that, but I'm glad everyone enjoyed it, she called out. She turned to give her guitar back to Stephanie, because she knew her sister would need to hide for a moment. She was always embarrassed during applause. Emily laughed. I'm not sure we're up for requests, but thanks for listening. A line formed in front of them, ready to buy the CDs they'd set out. Stephanie nudged Brittany. Go. I've got the table for the first shift. Brittany noticed that Chris was walking toward them as well, so it made sense that Stephanie would start. You take second shift, Brittany said to Emily, who nodded. Take your time getting to know Olivia. Thanks. I plan to. Brittany hurried out from behind the table and walked over to Matt and Olivia. What should we do first? Olivia shrugged. I've never been to a rodeo before. What is there to do? Brittany smiled. Well, we're supposed to go and sit and watch the rodeo. Okay. Brittany frowned. Do you have tickets? She asked. I'm a sponsor. I have a box. We can all sit there. Matt wasn't sure if Brittany had been planning to watch the rodeo, but he would love it if she did. You're not going to fall asleep while we're watching like your sister did, are you? Brittany laughed, shaking her head. Only Emily can fall asleep in the middle of a crowd that way. I actually have to have music playing to sleep. She patted her phone with its earphones. I can see that with you. Thanks for playing her favorite song for her. Did you like it? Brittany asked. Olivia nodded. You should sing that song every day. Brittany laughed. We usually sing songs that my sister and I write together. How come? Because we like to write songs, and we think they're pretty good. The girl seemed to accept that explanation, because she didn't say anything else about it. When they reached the stands, Matt led the way down into his box, explaining what the first event would be. Brittany wasn't terribly interested in the events, but she listened anyway. What did you do in the rodeo? She asked. I'm a bull rider. That's the first thing we'll watch. A bull rider needs to stay on for 8 seconds, and I know that sounds easy, but it feels like forever when you're on the bull's back. Olivia looked at her uncle. You don't still ride bulls, do you? No, I stopped that when we started living together. It's too dangerous, and we're a team now, remember? Olivia nodded, looking at the man getting ready to ride a bull. What happens if the bull steps on his head? He gets hurt really bad. He carefully left out the fact that the bull rider would most likely die. That was something she didn't need to hear after losing both of her parents so recently. I hope no one gets stepped on, then. Brittany smiled at the girl, liking her already. Do you know how to play any instruments? She asked. Olivia shook her head. I want to play piano, but I don't know how. Would you like me to teach you? Brittany wasn't sure why she even asked, because she hated teaching music, but this little girl, she wanted to do whatever she could to make her smile. Olivia nodded. Could you? I'll talk to your uncle about it. Brittany looked at Matt. Where do you live anyway? He laughed. About 30 minutes west of you. Oh, that's easy, then. I drive farther for lessons. He didn't say it, but he thought it. If you married me, there would be no travel involved. He knew it was too soon, so he stayed quiet. Olivia looked at Brittany. If you were Uncle Matt's Barbie, you could live with us. We'll see what happens. I've only known your uncle for a day. That's long enough to decide. Haven't you seen Cinderella? Brittany couldn't help but grin. I think we should all live in a Disney fairy tale, don't you? Olivia nodded seriously. I want to be Elsa. Brittany thought that was an odd choice, considering that Elsa lost her parents young, but she didn't question her. Maybe that's why she could relate to her. Elsa is beautiful, and she has Olaf to entertain her. And Anna. I like Anna, too. We should play princesses, and you could be Anna, and I'll be Elsa. Are you going to build an ice castle like Elsa did? Olivia nodded. I think every girl should have a castle. We live in a house. She looked at her uncle. I need a castle. Matt frowned. I could get you a toy castle maybe. I need to live in a castle, like a real live princess. Why don't you understand? Olivia sounded slightly panicked and moved to sit on Brittany's lap. He just doesn't know what princesses need. Brittany shook her head. We'll teach him. Soon, he'll understand all about princesses. The crowd around them groaned, and Brittany looked to see a rider on the ground. She hadn't paid any attention during the time she'd been in the box. Instead, she'd gotten to know the little girl. She wanted to look over at Matt and say that she'd marry him, if only to keep this little girl happy. When it was time for her to relieve Emily at their table, she dropped a kiss on Olivia's head. I hope I get to see you guys later. Matt smiled. We'll be at your table in an hour, and we'll all go to lunch somewhere. He was amazed at how well Brittany was getting along with Olivia. They already had more of a bond than he'd been able to form with the girl in the past few months. Whatever he did, he knew he had to find some way to get her to marry him and help him raise Olivia. He'd pay her if necessary. He looked over at the little girl, who looked lonely again. Why had she seemed so happy when Brittany was there? Chapter 3. Brittany did her hour at the table, and she sold CD after CD. She was glad they'd autographed so many the day before, because it was easy to just hand them to the people coming to purchase them. Any lull was filled with her adding her name to the CDs that Stephanie and Emily had signed during their shifts at the table. Her face almost hurt from the constant smile she had when she saw Stephanie walking toward the table, looking particularly alone. They'd all thought they'd spend their time off in twos, always together. But Emily and Brittany now had someone else they wanted to spend time with during their time away from the table, and that left Stephanie on her own. Stephanie took her spot behind the table, looking at Brittany with a smile. How'd we do? Fabulously. I can't believe we're selling so many CDs. It's kind of scary. Stephanie grinned. I really think we're taking off. Can I say how much I love sitting here listening to Lipstick on My Jeans on a loop and seeing people stop to listen to the words and smile? Brittany nodded. I totally get it. That's our music and our voices and our lyrics, it's all us. And we're totally winning. We are. Now go play with your man and his niece. Or is he your Ken now? Brittany shrugged. Not yet, but after spending a little time with her, I almost told him I was done thinking about his proposal, and the answer was yes. Stephanie laughed. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Brittany looked up and spotted Matt and Olivia walking toward them. I'm going to go and eat with them. I'll see you in a few hours. Brittany looked at her sister. You sure you're okay? Yeah, I'm just fine. Having fun dealing with people. Brittany felt sad for her sister even as she hurried over to Matt and Olivia. Olivia looked excited to see her and took her hand right away. "What are we going to eat?" Brittany looked over at Matt. "Do you have something in mind?" she asked. He shrugged. "I figured tacos, nachos, corn dogs, or some other ridiculous, fair food." Brittany stopped walking and stared at Matt for a moment. "You think tacos are a ridiculous, fair food?" That was it. There was no way she could marry the man. Ever. "I meant that corn dogs are ridiculous, fair food. Not tacos or nachos." "What kind of monster do you think I am?" She looked at him for a moment and then nodded. "I suppose that's fine. And I want tacos. Or empanadas. Any of these food trucks have empanadas?" "I'm sure there has to be one with empanadas." "Let's look." Brittany looked at Olivia. "Do you like empanadas?" Olivia nodded. "My mommy called them burrito pockets." "That's a good name for them." "I think I'll call them burrito pockets, too." They found a food truck with empanadas, tacos, and nachos. Each of them ordered a different flavor of empanada, and they took them to an open picnic table. "This place is packed," Matt said, shaking his head. "It's so different being at a rodeo as a fan rather than as a rider." "Which do you prefer?" Brittany asked. "To be really honest, I would rather ride rodeo every day for the rest of my life, but I can't, and I've accepted that. It doesn't mean I don't miss it, though." Matt shrugged. "Olivia is the most important person in my whole life, so I need to make sure that I'm always around for her." Brittany felt a twang of jealousy toward the little girl before she realized how ridiculous she was being. "I can understand that. She's a pretty special little princess." Olivia giggled. "I'm not really a princess. I'm just a little girl." "You're a princess to us," Brittany said with a wink. "I'll be your princess." Olivia took a bite of her empanada and smiled. "This is yummy." Brittany smiled, trying hers. "Mine is, too." She'd gotten one with potatoes and beef. It was her favorite, and she had them so rarely it was ridiculous. They both watched Matt take a bite. He made a terrible face. "Mine is yucky." He looked back and forth between their empanadas, and Olivia pulled hers closer. "I want a different one." "You have to eat what you chose, Uncle Matt." Brittany cut off a bite for Matt with her fork, feeding it to him like he was a child. "There, you had one bite of a good one, and now you have to eat your yucky one." Matt sighed and applied himself to his empanada, taking a big bite. Maybe it won't kill me. His empanada was actually very good, but he wanted Olivia to show a little bit of the spark she'd shown with Brittany earlier. As they ate, Brittany asked Olivia what she'd missed at the rodeo. "People kept getting tossed on the ground by the bulls," Olivia said. "And another person would get on another one. Seemed dumb to me." Brittany laughed, looking at Matt, who seemed half offended. "You know, there's something about riding a bull they think no man can ride." Olivia shook her head. "It's not safe. I think it's a bad idea, and I don't want you to do it anymore, Uncle Matt." "I promised I wouldn't." Matt still missed the rodeo life, but more important to him was the safety of his niece, and he wouldn't even think about riding again. "Taking care of my princess is so much more important than riding any bull ever could be. Bull riding is silly in comparison." "It's silly anyway," Olivia announced, eating another bite. "I'm glad you don't do it anymore." "So am I," Brittany said softly. She would never have been able to deal with the dangers he would face as a bull rider. It was just too scary in her opinion. She couldn't live with not knowing if he would survive the next ride. She knew some women dealt with that type of thing on a daily basis, but she just couldn't be one of them. Matt frowned at the look on Brittany's face. After knowing her for less than 24 hours, He knew that she would never be all right with him returning to bull riding, and that meant he had to not even think about it. No more bull riding for the rest of his life. "Thanks for caring," he said softly, wishing it were otherwise. He wanted her to care, of course, but he didn't want to stop. There was no choice, though. Olivia was too important to keep going. After they'd finished lunch, Olivia wanted to walk around the vendor tables and see what was there. Matt didn't, but he was willing to for Olivia. Brittany saw the look on his face. "Why don't you go watch the rodeo, and Olivia and I will walk around looking at what people are selling? We'll have fun, won't we?" Olivia nodded emphatically. "I like Brittany." Matt pulled out his wallet and handed Brittany a wad of $20 bills. "If she needs anything, feel free to get it." Brittany took the cash. "We'll spend it, won't we, Olivia?" Olivia grinned. "I like spending money." Matt simply laughed and walked back toward the box. He called over his shoulder. "Bring her back to me before you have your next shift at the table." Brittany and Olivia held hands as they walked from table to table in the heat. The Texas sun was pounding down on them, and Brittany wished for some cold water. "Let's go to my table," Brittany said. "We have water bottles, and I'll get us each one." "Yes." Olivia was just as hot as she was, apparently. Emily had just taken over her turn at the table, and she happily handed Olivia and Brittany bottles of water. "What are you two up to?" "We're shopping." "We like to shop," Olivia said. Emily smiled. "I wish I could shop with you." Stephanie was still at the table, about to leave. "Would it be okay if I shopped with you?" Brittany looked at Olivia. "What do you think? Should we let my sister shop with us?" "Her name is Stephanie." Olivia nodded regally. "You can shop with us." The three of them set out going from table to table. Olivia spotted a small table with handmade goods. There was an older woman sitting at the table. She smiled at Olivia. "Well, hello. Do you like Barbies?" Olivia nodded emphatically. "Of course I do. I have some clothes here that I made for Barbie. Do you want to see them?" "Yes." The woman held up outfits for Barbie and matching clothes for a girl. "I have the same for Cabbage Patch Kids." Olivia frowned. "What's a Cabbage Patch Kid?" Brittany watched the little girl, knowing they were going to walk away with more stuff than Matt would have liked, but she didn't care. Watching Olivia shop was fun for her. "It's a special kind of doll. Do you have any here?" Brittany asked. The woman pulled 2 Cabbage Patch Kids, new in box, out from under the counter. "I have 2. Do you like them?" Olivia touched first one and then the other. "I like this one. She looks like me." The girl had dark curls and a Hispanic look to her. "How much?" Brittany asked. The woman named a price that sounded like it would have been the same as the store. "We'll take the one that looks like Olivia and matching pajamas." "Which pajamas do you like, Olivia?" "I like the ones with the horsey." "What size are the ones with the horse?" Brittany asked. She flipped out the tag on Olivia's shirt, so she could be certain she was buying the right size. "They're a 6. Brittany frowned. She's wearing a size 5, but that means 6 will be next, and it shouldn't be too horribly big. "Yes, we'll take the horse pajamas for girl and doll, and then we probably need the dress that matches Barbie, too. I have one of those in a 6 as well." "Does that work?" the woman asked. "Perfect." Brittany paid with the money Matt had given her, and she accepted the purchases in a bag. "There, now what should we look at?" Stephanie wandered along with them, adding very little to the conversation, but obviously happy to not be alone. Olivia went to a little tent that had boxes that had been carved from wood. "Do you see any you like?" Brittany asked. She would have hesitated if it had been her money, but she really had no trouble buying stuff with Matt's money. Olivia chose a unicorn-shaped box, and the proprietor showed them how to unlock it with a special piece of wood and how the box lid slid off. "This one is perfect." Brittany purchased the box, and the man carefully wrapped it for them. "Where to next?" As they walked through the tables, Olivia became happier. "This is just like shopping with my mama," she finally said as they finished. Stephanie looked sad at her words, but Brittany crouched down. "Did you like shopping with your mama?" "It was our very favorite thing, but it wasn't as much fun when Daddy was there. He didn't let us buy as many fun things." Brittany laughed, hugging the girl close. "Okay, I have to sit at the table again in a few minutes. Let's get you back to your Uncle Matt." "I want to stay with you," Olivia said. Her brown eyes pled with Brittany to let her stay. "I need to pay attention to the customers who want to buy CDs." Brittany wished she could watch the girl and sell, but she didn't know how it could work. Stephanie nodded. "I'll sit there, too, and you can help us both." Olivia jumped up and down, clapping her hands. "Thank you." "Let's go tell your uncle what we're doing," Brittany said as she headed toward the arena where the rodeo was taking place. They wound their way through the crowd until they found Matt, sitting alone in his box. "Hey." Brittany sat next to him for a minute. "Olivia wants to stay with me, so Stephanie is going to work with me." Matt looked at the little girl. "Are you sure?" "Brittany is going to have to pay attention to the people who want to talk to her." "I'm sure. I like Brittany and Stephanie." "All right. That sounds really good to me." Matt watched as Olivia left with the two sisters, knowing deep inside that Brittany was what the little girl needed. He'd wait the 2 weeks she'd asked for before officially asking her to marry him, but he was already planning the grandest proposal he could think of. He and Olivia needed her. Olivia sat in a chair between Brittany and Stephanie, and Brittany took the lead, talking to anyone who came to the table. "Are you the lead singer, the one who writes lyrics, or the one who plays all the instruments?" a young girl asked her. "I am the one who plays all the instruments, and my sister, Stephanie, there is the one who writes the lyrics." Brittany waved her hand to indicate her sister. "You're all just amazing," the girl said, buying 3 CDs, "and they're autographed, right?" "They are," Brittany told her, handing her the change from her purchase. "I appreciate you listening to our music." "Well, I think you're the next big act, and I'm just glad I got to see you perform before anyone else did." "I hope you're right. We're playing at Rebel Saloon a week from Saturday. I hope you can make it there, too. I'll tell all my friends." The girl happily rushed away, hugging the CDs to her chest. Olivia smiled. "She thinks you're special 'cause you're famous, but I know you're special 'cause you're my friend." Brittany laughed. "I am your friend. I think you're an amazing little girl. You're not just being nice to me because you like Uncle Matt?" "I'm not at all. I do like your Uncle Matt, but I like you, too." Brittany couldn't help but wonder if Matt had brought home a girl who had only pretended to like Olivia. Olivia nodded. "I'm glad, because we need to be friends." "Yes, we do." Stephanie watched the whole thing with a surprised look on her face. "I'm glad you two are friends already." Olivia looked at Stephanie. "You're my friend, too. But I think Brittany is my best friend, and you're just a regular friend." "Sorry, but there's only room for one best friend." Stephanie laughed. "There sure is, and Brittany is a wonderful best friend. I chose well." Olivia watched as more people came up and her new best friend sold several more CDs. Finally, their hour was up, and Brittany looked over at Stephanie. "Thank you for helping us." "No problem. I enjoyed myself." "But now you have to sit here for 2 hours in a row," Brittany said. She hated doing that to her sister. "But I've had a wonderful time for the past 2 hours. So I'm glad." Olivia just smiled as she got to her feet. Let's shop more. Brittany waved at her sister as the little girl dragged her off. Chapter 4. By the end of the day, Brittany was exhausted, but in a good way. She spent almost all of her time with Olivia, and the two had become fast friends. Why don't I take my two favorite girls out for supper tonight? Matt asked as Brittany stood with her sisters at the table. Brittany nodded. No matter how tired she was, she wanted to spend more time with Matt and little Olivia. I'd like that a lot. Where should we go? Olivia clapped her hands together in front of her chest. McDonald's. Brittany had to laugh at the girl's response. She obviously knew what she liked and knew it well. Matt shook his head. If we're doing fast food burgers, we're doing Whataburger, but I was thinking of something a little nicer than fast food. Olivia sighed. I thought it was a good idea. Brittany squatted down until she was eye level with Olivia. It was a good idea for a different day. Tonight, Uncle Matt wants to eat somewhere where people will bring our food to us. Right, Uncle Matt? Right. He had no idea where she was thinking of going, but he'd agree, because it seemed important at the moment. He was glad she was so good at communicating with Olivia. I guess that's okay, Olivia said. She took Brittany's hand, then looked at Stephanie and Emily. I'm taking your sister. Emily grinned, leaning on the table and looking at Olivia. I see that. Don't keep her out too late. We have to be back here tomorrow. I'll make sure Uncle Matt has her home at a decent hour. Stephanie and Emily exchanged a glance and burst out laughing together. We would appreciate that, Stephanie said. Olivia looked at her uncle. Didn't you hear? We have to have Brittany home at a decent hour. Let's go. She made a shooing motion, as if hurrying him on, and Matt shook his head. What had happened to the little girl who hid in her room all day and didn't talk to him? This little girl was bossy. Matt shook his head. In one day, the girl had transformed from staying in her room all the time and looking sad to bossing him around. He wasn't sure how he felt about it yet, but he had a feeling he didn't like it a whole lot. He reached for Olivia's free hand and walked toward his truck. He used the remote for his vehicle to start the truck, wanting it to cool at least a little before he got there. The Texas sun combined with the greenhouse effect was absolutely brutal. As they walked, Brittany kept up a steady stream of conversation with Olivia, asking questions he never would have thought to ask a girl so young. So if you could be any animal in the whole world, what animal would you be? Olivia scrunched up her face for a moment. A kitty. Then I could touch people if I wanted, but if I wanted to be alone, I could climb a tree and get away. Brittany laughed. Good answer. She was a little surprised at how well thought out the girl's answer was. What about you? Olivia asked. I think I'd want to be a penguin, so I could walk like this. Brittany said, putting her feet together and waddling strangely. Olivia giggled. We could be penguin friends. She started waddling as well, taking her hand from Matt's so she could participate in the strange walk more fully. Matt looked back and forth between the two of them, realizing they belonged together. There was some sort of magic that Brittany had with Olivia that surprised him. She really was the perfect person to be his wife, and a new mother for Olivia. He wanted to ask her again right away, but he'd give her the 2 weeks she'd asked for. He had to. When they got to the truck, Brittany picked up Olivia and put her in the back seat, carefully fastening her into her car seat. All comfy? She asked. Olivia nodded. You did it just right. Matt realized he'd never gotten approval from Olivia, and she was praising Brittany right and left. He couldn't help but wonder why. Not that he needed approval from a small child, but it would be nice if she at least acknowledged the things he did for her. He drove to a chain restaurant that he knew Olivia liked, but wasn't a place where they'd have to stand in line for their food. Olivia clung to Brittany's hand as if she had known her for years, ignoring Matt's offer of a hand. When they were seated, Olivia wanted a booster seat to sit beside Brittany. He watched it all, absolutely astonished the little girl liked Brittany so much. Once they were all seated, Brittany pointed to the pictures on the kids' menu that was on the table in front of Olivia. "What are you hungry for?" "I think I want mini corn dogs," Olivia said. "And I think I need something really cold to drink." "Like lemonade or ice water?" Matt asked. He knew her parents had never given her soft drinks, so he didn't even offer one, wanting to obey their wishes. Olivia shook her head, glaring at her uncle. Brittany smiled. "You need a shake, don't you?" She wasn't sure how Matt didn't understand that a shake was really cold, while lemonade and water were merely cold. "Yes." Olivia smiled at Brittany, taking the crayons that were offered. "I'm going to color the corn dog on the menu." "Good idea," Brittany said, giving her attention to her own menu. Matt wasn't sure if he should be amused, thrilled, or offended, so he decided on amusement. Why be upset when he could laugh? After they'd all given their orders, Olivia looked at Brittany. "I think you should marry Uncle Matt and live with us." Brittany smiled. "I think I need to get to know him just a little bit better first." "I mean, I want to live with you, but what if he has yucky habits?" Olivia nodded seriously. "That's really smart of you to see first." "I'm not sure he should get to live with you." Brittany looked over at Matt with a grin, noticing the look of surprise on his face. "I think Olivia and I are friends." "I can see that." He shook his head. The entire time Olivia had lived with him, he'd worked to get her to be friendly with him. And Brittany was her best buddy the first day. How had she done it? "You'll have to teach me your tricks." "No tricks. We just like the same things, because we're both girls." "I think I can understand that." Brittany picked up her phone and texted Matt, not sure how else to handle things in front of Olivia. "I have a feeling she was closer to her mother, and because I'm a girl, I make her feel safer." Matt read his text and nodded. It really did make sense. "Thanks for the explanation. I feel like a total failure as an uncle." "Don't. I'll help you, and we'll make it all work." Matt nodded. "Thank you." After their short text conversation, Brittany looked over at Olivia. "So what is your favorite thing to do with your Barbies?" "I like to have them ride horses, and I like to play with the camper." Olivia looked excited to talk about her favorite thing in the world. "Wow. The camper is amazing, isn't it? Do you know how to ride a horse?" Olivia shook her head slowly. "My daddy always said he was going to teach me, but he never had time." Brittany glanced at Matt, who was listening to every word, before she leaned close to Olivia and said in a loud whisper for Matt to hear, "I think Uncle Matt could teach you to ride." Olivia's eyes grew wide, and she looked at Matt. "You could?" Matt nodded. "I've been riding since I was younger than you. I'd be happy to teach you whenever you want." The little girl smiled. "Tomorrow?" Matt grinned. "Tomorrow is a rodeo day. Do I get to go and be with Brittany again?" Matt's eyes locked with Brittany's. "I think that's up to your new friend. She has work to do at the rodeo, and I don't know if you make it harder or not." Brittany grinned. "She doesn't make it harder at all. I had a great day with her. And we sold lots of CDs, didn't we, Olivia? You have to remember that when I have my time at the table, you either need to sit quietly next to me, or you need to sit with your uncle." Olivia nodded, a big smile on her face. "I can do that." Looking at Matt, Brittany said, "I think you should bring her. We need some more girl time." He nodded. "All right. I think tomorrow is a rodeo day for Olivia as well." "How many more rodeo days?" Olivia asked. "Just 2. Saturday and Sunday." Then when Monday comes, it's back to normal. Will we still get to see Brittany? Absolutely, as long as she's not sick of us. Brittany laughed. Who could get sick of the two of you? Olivia clapped, even as their food was set down in front of them. Corn dogs and rodeo. Matt was glad that Brittany would be there with them at the rodeo again the next day, but he couldn't help but wonder what was going to happen when he was left to his own devices with the little girl once more. Would he be able to keep that smile on her little face? After supper, he drove Brittany home and walked her to her door. Olivia had fallen asleep in the truck, and he'd locked her in. Are you sure you shouldn't stay with her? Brittany asked, not liking the idea of leaving the child in the car. We need to keep it quick. I can't leave her for long. Matt kept glancing at the vehicle. Brittany stood on tiptoe and kissed him quickly. Go to your baby. I should have told you to stay in the truck, so you could be with her. You did tell me to stay in the truck. Then you should have listened to me. Brittany opened the door and stepped inside, going to the couch and sitting beside Emily, who was sound asleep. Stephanie was at her computer, typing furiously. What are you working on? Another new song. Watching the crowd today made me think. That's awesome. Olivia is coming to the rodeo again tomorrow, if you wouldn't mind teaming up again. Stephanie turned from the computer and smiled at her sister. That little girl is just precious. I wanted to wrap her up and bring her home and just set her on a shelf. Well, it's good you didn't, because she would not have been happy. Brittany smiled. I think I'm going to marry him when he asks again. I'm half in love with him and completely in love with his niece. How could I do anything else? I knew you would. I've seriously always known somewhere inside me that you would marry a man who proposed within a few hours of meeting you. I know it's crazy, but it just seemed so true. I'm glad someone always knew I would marry. I was starting to think I wouldn't. Brittany hid a yawn behind her hand. Hurry up. I'm getting sleepy, and I want to read over the lyrics before I sleep. I do my best composing when I'm asleep. She looked over at her sleeping sister. Speaking of sleep, how long has this one been out cold? An hour or two? You might want to nudge her along to bed. Brittany nodded. She and Stephanie had always marveled at how Emily could fall asleep anywhere at any time. She never seemed to have enough to eat or have enough sleep. Stephanie swore she'd once fallen asleep on a treadmill, but Brittany wasn't sure about that one. She nudged Emily. Wake up. You need to move your butt to bed. Emily rubbed her eyes. Okay. Brushing my teeth, and then sleeping for a month. Brittany smiled. I'll wake you when your month is up. You're mean to me. Emily got to her feet and shuffled out of the room, still half asleep. Stephanie printed what she'd been writing and handed it to Brittany. Here's what I have. Brittany read over the words, all about the loneliness of being in a crowd with no one to love. How much it hurt every time she saw a man take a woman's hand. After reading it, Brittany looked at Stephanie. I'm sorry you get so sad, but this is country music gold. I promise you we're going to make millions. It's not funny like lipstick on my jeans, but everyone is going to understand the sentiment. Do you have a working title? Stephanie nodded. Yeah. It's Alone in a Crowd. Perfect. I really do think it's going to be fabulous, and I already have music going through my head for it. Good. Stephanie stood and stretched. I'm going to bed, too. Mind if I use the bathroom first? While their apartment had 3 bedrooms, there were only 2 bathrooms. Emily had won the right to her own bathroom, so Brittany and Stephanie shared one. Not at all. I'll sit here and read your lyrics a couple of more times so they're cemented in my brain. Brittany was tired, but she was thinking so much about her day. Olivia, she wanted to keep her, and she'd marry Matt just for the little girl. It was crazy, but the love she felt for her was strong. Over and over, she read the song Stephanie had penned the words for. It was going to be a huge hit. She could feel it deep inside her. She also knew that she and Emily would be marrying soon, and Stephanie would be alone in crowds, apartments, and most other places. Oh, they'd keep their singing group together, but they were all about to become individuals and not just identical triplets. Brittany took off her glasses and looked at them. They were what set her apart from her sisters, and suddenly she didn't want to wear them, if only for a little while. She wanted to feel like identical triplets again, and not just on stage. She knew the feeling would pass once she wasn't feeling so strangely about things. Once she was in bed, she thought about the song some more, thinking they needed to do something special for Stephanie. Maybe a vacation the three of them could take together, their last one as single women. The money they were making from the rodeo would surely cover it, if Emily didn't find a way to throw all of the extra back into the business. As the business manager, she was constantly thinking of new ways to spend their money. She laid awake for hours, wishing she could go to sleep as easy as Emily did. It was crazy how her sister could be having a conversation one moment and sleeping the next. Brittany had to be lying just so. She had to shut her mind off. Maybe that was the difference. She had a mind that constantly worked, and Emily shut hers off easily. It had to be her advanced intelligence. She chuckled to herself as she lay there, wishing she could sleep. It would happen. Eventually. In the meantime, Matt filled her mind. Chapter 5. After the rodeo was over, Brittany didn't see Matt as often as she had. It made her sad, but they both had lives to live. He was there for the concert at Rebel's Saloon along with Chris and Joe, one of Chris's employees who he brought to meet Stephanie. They sat with the men after their first set, which went amazingly well. Brittany was thrilled with their performance, and they sang their new rodeo song for the first time. The song about being lonely in crowds needed a few more tweaks before they were ready to sing it for others. By the time they were ready to go back for the second set, Stephanie had scooted her chair almost on top of Brittany's to get away from Joe. He was a pig and coming on way too strong for someone as shy as Stephanie. Brittany was about to get up and go to the back with Stephanie to get ready for the next set, but Emily whispered something to Chris and left with Stephanie. Joe looked over at Brittany. "Don't you need to get ready, too?" Brittany shook her head. "Nope. I'm ready. Emily probably just needs help redoing her hair. It tends to fly away during performances." Joe crossed his arms over his chest. "Have you three ever shared a guy?" Her eyes widened with shock. "Excuse me?" Chris stood up. "Joe, you can leave now. But I rode here with you." Chris tossed some cash on the table. "Take an Uber and go home. You are ridiculous, and I don't ever even want to look at you again." "Are you firing me?" After a moment of consideration, Chris shook his head. "I need you. We're too busy to let you go. But you're going to behave better than this around ladies. You hear me?" Joe grabbed the money and stormed out of the saloon. "I don't know why you thought he was right for Stephanie," Brittany said, shaking her head. "What a jerk. I really screwed up with him." Chris returned to his seat, his fists still clenched. "Please apologize to Stephanie for me." Brittany nodded. "I will. I need to get backstage now." She walked over and dropped a kiss on Chris's cheek. "Thank you for taking care of him." Chris smiled at her. "I shouldn't have brought him." "No, but you took care of it. It's all good now." Brittany hurried away, joining her sisters backstage. After their third set of the night, all three sisters were pumped up and excited. The men had left after the second set, so the three of them went home together. Emily couldn't stop talking about having dinner with Chris's mother the next night. Brittany and Stephanie let her go on and on about how nervous she was. Everyone loves you, Brittany finally said. I don't know what you're so nervous about. I don't either, but she really makes me freak out. She likes our music, so I know she doesn't have horrible taste or anything, but what if she doesn't think I'm good enough for Chris? I can't imagine life without him. You've known him for less than 2 weeks. Brittany responded, shaking her head. Emily gave her a look. And how would you feel if Matt was killed in a car wreck tomorrow? You've known him for less than 2 weeks. Brittany felt a lump in her chest at the idea of losing Matt. I guess I understand, then, don't I? After they were home, Emily slept sitting up on the couch, while Stephanie and Brittany hammered out the last of the notes for the new song. I really think we have a hit with this, Brittany said. Want to wake Em up and play it for her? Stephanie grinned and nodded. I wish I could sleep like she does. I've said that a million times. And I'm never worried about waking her, because she'll go back to sleep in under a minute again. Brittany put her hand on Emily's arm. We want you to hear the song. Emily nodded, sitting up straighter. Lyrics? She held her hand out for the sheet of paper she knew Stephanie would have ready for her. Emily always woke up as quickly as she fell asleep. It was unnerving. Brittany strummed the chords on her guitar as she and Stephanie sang. After one verse and the chorus, Emily jumped in. It was when their 3 voices melded together that the real magic happened. After the final notes drifted away, Brittany held out her arm. I have goosebumps. She looked at Emily, knowing she'd probably want to change 1 or 2 things, which was always her role in the songwriting process. What do you think? Emily held her goosebumped arm against her sister's. Not a single note or word. That was absolutely amazing. Brittany grinned. It felt pretty incredible, but it's hard to know. Stephanie jumped up and ran into the kitchen, returning with 3 bottles of water. She opened hers, and the 3 of them toasted together. To the Kelly sisters. The other 2 chorused her words, and they all took a drink of their water. Brittany looked over at Emily. Tomorrow night is going to be amazing, because we just wrote our first top 10 hit. Emily nodded, grinning. You know, I think we have. Minutes later, they all went their separate ways to their rooms, and Brittany smiled as she rolled to her side, hugging a pillow. We're really going to make it. Asterisk. Monday afternoon, while Emily worked, Brittany went shopping with Chris. He wanted help picking out just the right ring to propose to Emily, and taking someone identical to her was helpful for the right sizing. She seemed really upset when she got home last night, Brittany said as she pointed to a ring she thought would be perfect for her sister. That one. It's just right. I don't know how I'm going to get her to see me. She pretty much ran away from me last night after saying goodbye. My mom made it really clear she wanted her to have babies right away, even thought I told her it was fine if we waited a little while. So that's what happened. She didn't say, but it was pretty obvious she was upset. Brittany held out her hand so he could see if they could use the ring in the size they were selling. Maybe I should ask her to go to supper with me tonight, and I'll meet you somewhere. When she sees you, I'll duck out. I think that's a really good idea. He nodded. You don't mind? Mind deceiving my sister and best friend? Why would I mind? She grinned at him. Truthfully, I know she'll be happy after you 2 talk, so I will happily help deceive her. No problem at all. Oh, good. She looked down at the ring he'd slipped onto her finger, and she nodded. This is absolutely perfect. It fits well? Yes. It's just what she needs. They set up a time and place for her to take Emily before Brittany left the store. She'd go home and work with Stephanie for a while until Emily got home from her job selling cowboy boots. Once Stephanie understood the plan, she wouldn't even try to go to supper with them. Stephanie laughed when Brittany told her what they were doing. You'll go to supper with me after, right? Sure. Or we'll make something here. No skin off my nose either way. Sounds good. I'll think about which I'd rather do. Brittany knew that often Stephanie, the youngest of the three, didn't like to eat out. It was a problem of having too many people around her. She called it peopling, and she flat out preferred not to do it. When Emily got home, she wanted to work out, and it worried Brittany a little that she wouldn't be able to get her to Chris on time. I'll work out with you. Emily nodded, still looking sad. Stephanie said she wanted to stay home and play with some depressing lyrics Emily had written. Even Brittany could see that there was hope for them, so she let it go and changed into her workout clothes. After they worked out, she took Emily to the restaurant where she'd agreed to meet Chris, and when Emily saw him, Brittany faded into the background, watching as Emily sat down with him. As she left the restaurant and was walking to the car, she got a text. Waiting until she was in her air-conditioned vehicle, she read the text. Olivia's afraid to get on a horse. She said she'd do it if you were here. There was a sad face emoji next to the text. Brittany called Stephanie. Olivia is afraid to get on a horse, and Matt needs help with her. Can you handle yourself for supper? You know I can. I think I have these lyrics like we want them. We're totally going to have a fabulous second CD with these songs we're writing. Okay, you have fun with that, and I'll go see Matt and Olivia. Brittany hung up with her sister and called Matt. Do you want me to drive out there and help? She knew he'd said he was on a ranch outside the cities, but she couldn't for the life of her remember where. That would be wonderful if you really don't mind. Do you have GPS? Sure do. She tapped in the address he gave her. Tell Olivia I'm on my way. Thank you, Brittany. I don't think you have any idea how much you mean to us already. Brittany had been in touch with Matt quite a few times since the rodeo was over, but she'd only seen him on Saturday night, and Olivia hadn't been there. She was excited to see two of her favorite people again. She drove out of the city and to the east of Houston, heading into an area that was completely new to her. She had her music turned up and was singing along to the songs as she drove. She didn't know why Emily didn't like to drive. It was one of her very favorite things in the whole world. When she got to the ranch, she pulled under the big sign that announced it was the Sullivan Ranch. She drove up to the house and parked, getting out of her car. As soon as she'd shut the door, she heard a scream and saw Olivia running toward her. Brittany squatted down and spread her arms wide as she hugged the girl. I missed you. It was strange to admit it aloud, but that little bit of nothing had become incredibly important to her. Olivia pulled away with a grin. I missed you, too. I'm so glad you came. Are you going to watch me ride my new pony? New pony? Did your uncle buy you a new pony before you even learned to ride? Olivia nodded. He said it would be better for me to learn on a kid-sized horse. I think that's a great idea. What did you name him? Brittany didn't know a lot about horses, but she did know that most riding horses were geldings. Buttercup. Is it a girl? Olivia shook her head. No, I just like the name Buttercup. Uncle Matt doesn't like it, but what does he know? Brittany laughed. Very little apparently. She let Olivia lead her to the paddock. Oh, what a nice pony. She reached out and patted the gelding's nose while Olivia danced around. I can't wait to see you ride him. I have a helmet. Olivia said, rushing off to put a helmet on, and then she came back. Where's your uncle? He said to tell you he's on his way. Olivia ran back to Brittany and hugged her once more. I wish you were here all the time. I wish I was, too. And she did. Brittany realized that she really did love Matt and Olivia, and she was ready to move on to the next stage in her life. Stephanie would be lonely, but they'd still see her often for rehearsals and concerts. She saw Matt walking toward them, and her heart skipped a beat. She wanted to run to him and kiss him like crazy, but she wouldn't do that with Olivia still hugging her. "Hey, you!" He grinned at her, his eyes seeming to see right through her clothes. She knew he was as attracted to her as she was to him. "Howdy. I see you found Olivia. We seem to be attached." Brittany grinned down at the little girl. Olivia giggled. "I'm keeping Brittany here." "Oh, good. I think she'd run away if you weren't hanging on to her so tightly." Matt didn't seem to mind the little girl attached to Brittany. When he reached her, he slid his arm around her and kissed her. "I've missed your face." "Well, if you need to see it more, my sisters and I can take turns coming over." "Nah, your sisters aren't as pretty as you are." Chris said the same thing to Emily. "We're identical." "What part of identical triplets do you men not understand?" Brittany shook her head, wishing she had the courage to pull him in for another kiss, right there in front of Olivia. Instead, she looked down at the child. "Now are you going to get on that pony? I need to see you ride." Olivia looked over at the horse and nodded, seeming to size the animal up. It was already saddled, and she was wearing her cowboy boots and her helmet. She looked ready to go. "Help me, Uncle Matt." Matt walked over and showed Olivia where to put her foot. He'd shopped for the gentlest pony he could find, and he'd watched this one with children for a while before he'd made his final decision. Once she was seated, he walked around with her, keeping one hand on her. After 3 turns around the paddock, Olivia said, "I want to show Brittany I can do it by myself." He frowned, but took his hand off her, ready to spring toward her if she fell. He didn't know why he was so worried. He'd been put on a horse when he was 18 months old, and it hadn't hurt him any. She rode all the way around once, but when she started her second time around, she got careless, turning around and looking at Brittany. "Look at me." As soon as the last word was out of her mouth, she slid sideways off the pony's back and crashed hard into the fence. Both Brittany and Matt ran to her, hearing her screams of pain. "Is she okay?" Brittany asked, not able to see around Matt's hulking form. "Looks like her arm is broken." He scooped the little girl up and carried her toward his truck. "Brittany, my keys are just inside the door, hanging on a hook. Grab them and come back. We're going to the hospital." "Brittany. I need Brittany to go." "I'll be with you." As Brittany ran into the house and grabbed Matt's keys, she realized she had tears pouring down her cheeks. How on earth had she forced that girl to get on the pony and hurt herself? She let out a little sob, glad no one could hear her.